Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking 5 absolutely chilling case files, all centered around bizarre forest phenomena. We're going to systematically break down these accounts that honestly just challenge everything we think we know about the natural world. And we'll be looking directly at the documented evidence from each event.
So, imagine stepping into the woods. It's a place you've known your whole life, right? But suddenly it hits you. You are no longer the apex predator out there. The woods are vast, they're wild, and frankly, they are incredibly unpredictable. Today, we're looking at encounters that completely defy logic and science. I mean, these aren't just your typical everyday animal sightings. We are talking about highly experienced people, seasoned hunters, wildland firefighters, everyday families who came face to face with the absolute impossible.
All right, let's look at Case File 01, Tragedy at Fox Lake.
Let's set the scene. It's July of 1953, and the Huggin family is staying at a super remote cabin in Wade, Ontario. The adults are outside packing up the car, and in a tiny 10-minute window, 5-year-old Geraldine just vanishes. No sound, no trace. Well, the search effort that kicks off turns into this bizarre chronological nightmare. By day 3, trackers actually find what look like her footprints, but they're way up high on a mossy ledge. Then day 7 hits, and the timeline takes a really dark turn. Trackers find this enormous footprint deep in the swamp. And when I say enormous, I mean way too large to be human, but totally unidentifiable as any known animal. 2 days after that, a single piece of her plaid shirt turns up 2.5 miles away.
Tragically, they did eventually locate Geraldine's remains. But the clinical evidence presented an absolute paradox. Get this, her clothing was utterly untorn and there were 0 bloodstains. That's a huge detail because it means whatever took her did not attack like a normal predator. A standard wolf attack, for example, would have ripped right through that fabric. To make things even weirder, her remains looked like they had been dragged into a meadow where this massive area of grass was completely matted down, literally like some giant body had been resting there. So you're left with this impossible choice. Was it an enormous person operating silently in the woods, or some completely unknown megapredator?
Which brings up a terrifying question. Could an apex predator actually completely blend into its environment? Let's jump ahead to 2010 and see how this builds into an encounter with something entirely unseen. Because if a massive, physical creature could somehow evade detection back in 1953, what happens when the entity itself distorts our actual vision?
That brings us to Case File 02, the invisible forest entity.
So in 2010, Jan McCabe, who is a very experienced deer hunter, is sitting up in her tree stand in an Ohio forest. Suddenly, the woods go completely uncomfortably silent. You know that feeling when everything just stops? Then she sees this bizarre visual distortion moving through the branches. The best way she could describe it was like looking at a person wrapped entirely in saran wrap. She quickly snaps a photo with her BlackBerry. Now, her husband happens to be an optical physicist, and when he analyzes this blurry photo, the results are staggering. If you look at the device's program settings, that phone was only built to produce small, medium, or large images. That's it. But Jan's photo, it rendered in this impossible random resolution size that the phone's software literally couldn't produce on its own, meaning whatever she photographed exerted a direct physical effect on the technology itself, corrupting the file the exact millisecond she took it.
So, if invisible anomalies can actually distort our technology, what happens when we capture their actual voices? I mean, a corrupted image file is one thing, right? But it's a whole other ballgame to capture sustained, objective audio of something that simply shouldn't exist.
Let's look at Case File 03, the Sierra Nevada recordings.
Okay, flashback to late 1971. A hunter named Ron Moorhead and his buddies are camping at a super remote 4,000-foot elevation site in the Sierra Nevadas. In the dead of night, they realize they're surrounded by these heavy, bipedal footsteps. Then, out of the darkness, multiple creatures start communicating in this terrifying, nonsensical imitation of human language. It's wild. But here's the kicker. Ron actually brought back an audio recording of this, and a team of electrical engineering experts objectively validated it. Dr. R. Lynn Kurland at the University of Wyoming proved the audio was 100% unedited. The vocal pitch and range, completely beyond human capabilities. We're talking about a creature estimated to be up to 8 feet tall based on the acoustics. And even more incredibly, a cryptolinguist pointed out that the simultaneous overlapping voices of the creatures and the humans on that tape, well, they would have been virtually impossible to dub using 1971 technology. They really, genuinely recorded giant, unknown bipeds conversing in the pitch black.
Hearing something in the dark is terrifying. But how do you survive when the unknown actually decides to hunt you? We're shifting gears now, moving from a remote hunting camp all the way to a family's front porch in rural Maine.
Here is Case File 04, The Farmhouse Siege.
In 2005, the Martin family moves into this incredibly isolated farmhouse surrounded by dense woods. Things start getting strange almost immediately when they find this massive, intentionally constructed dirt and moss den hidden deep in the tree line. And this thing was built on a scale way too large for any normal wildlife. But the true nightmare kicks off a few months later. Eric and Shelley Martin are just having coffee when, once again, all the forest wildlife goes completely unnaturally quiet. Shelley grabs a flashlight, scans the misty field outside, and spots 5 massive wolf-like creatures staring directly at their house. Eric is a lifelong hunter, and even he couldn't identify what they were looking at. Suddenly, these things charge the house, and the family has to scramble to barricade themselves inside.
Now, what's truly terrifying about this is the clinical precision of the attack. This was not random animal behavior. These creatures systematically targeted the family. It started with pulsating lights appearing deep in the woods, and then these things stepped right out onto the gravel driveway. At one point, Shelley looks out an upstairs window and she sees one of these wolf-like beasts standing fully upright on its hind legs. It had to be at least 8 feet tall. For the entire night, the family is trapped, listening as these 5 creatures pace the wraparound porch. They're communicating completely silently with each other, jumping up onto the first-floor roof and literally trying to scratch and burrow their way through the walls to get into the second-story bedroom.
So you have to ask yourself, are these encounters just misidentified wild animals, or are we dealing with something entirely unexplainable? Our final case file plunges us into an utterly surreal nightmare where the line between animal and human just blurs entirely. This is the point where behavioral logic completely breaks down.
This brings us to Case File 05, The Screaming Cabin.
It's 2004. A wildland firefighter named Mike is out scouting a trail on his ATV when an aggressively behaving bobcat blocks his path right in the middle of broad daylight. But instead of running away like a normal bobcat, the animal opens its mouth and lets out this blood-curdling, undeniably human scream. Then it darts up a tree and perches on a branch directly over Mike's trail. Understandably, Mike speeds away in a total panic. He gets about a half-mile down the trail, only to stumble upon a tiny, boarded-up cabin in the middle of this totally isolated federal forest. There wasn't even a doorknob. Instead, there was a shiny, brand-new silver chain threaded through the hole, locking it from the outside. Mike shines his flashlight through the cracks, and he sees that every single piece of furniture inside the cabin is sitting perfectly upside down.
At this point, Mike is completely unnerved. He runs back to his ATV to get out of there, but as he's fleeing the cabin, he comes face to face with this terrifying mirror image of his earlier animal encounter. Standing in the exact same spot the bobcat had been is a barefoot Native American woman wearing a tattered white nightgown. As Mike gets closer, she lets out the exact same blood-curdling scream as the bobcat. And then, horrifyingly, she runs over to the exact same tree, climbs up and perches on the exact same branch, hovering over the trail, just staring down at him with her mouth wide open. I mean, it's crazy, right? It really leaves us wondering what ancient, absurd, and completely unexplainable forces are actually governing the deep woods, manipulating both nature and humans like some kind of highly coordinated trap.
When you step into the deep woods, who is really watching who? These case files honestly challenge everything we think we know about the natural world. From impossible physics to unexplainable intelligence and coordination, the data strongly suggests we are sharing the wilderness with things we don't fully understand. So the next time you find yourself out hiking in the forest and all the wildlife suddenly goes completely dead silent, you might want to just turn back.